Hello, New Mexico, and welcome to another episode of Around the Roundhouse, a podcast featuring the policies, politics, and personalities of the land of enchantment. I'm your host, Daniel Chacón. Our guest this week is State Representative Rebecca Dow, a Republican from Truth or Consequences who is seeking a fifth term to the New Mexico House of Representatives. Representative Dow serves as House Republican Caucus Chair, making her the third highest ranking Republican in the House chamber. Earlier this week, the New Mexico Supreme Court handed Representative Dow, and some say voters, a major legal victory, reversing a district court ruling that disqualified her nominating petitions and directing the New Mexico Secretary of State's office to place her name back on the June primary ballot. Representative, thank you for joining us. It was nice to see you this week, and here in Santa Fe, it's nice to see you again.
Well, thank you so much for having me. If you're wondering about the background, I just stepped out of a Doniana Chamber of Commerce meeting. I'm at the famous New Mexico Farm and Ranch Museum in it's called the General Store exhibit.
I was wondering what those guns were all about. I didn't know if you were, if you had a ton of guns at your house.
Well, I may or may not have a ton of guns at my house. I am a staunch supporter of the Second Amendment. But I did recognize some of these firearms actually that are around me when I grew up as a child on my grandpa's farm and ranch.
Well, one of these days I'll make it out to the museum. I've heard wonderful things about it. So one day I will visit and I will take a selfie from there and send it to you.
Okay. All right. Maybe I'll just join you.
Representative, after the Supreme Court ruled in your favor, you told your supporters you were going to sleep well that night. Did this case, did you have some sleepless or restless nights after this complaint was filed?
Oh, I did because I had not seen a paper nominating petition in years. This was the second time that I filed mine electronically, and the forms have been changing. And several of our forms, we no longer print and turn in at all. They're just verified by our clerk. So I had forgotten what that antiquated paper nominating petition even looked like, and had been using the Secretary of State's secure nominating petition format where they verify and only allow eligible voters to sign on our behalf. So when I saw their example of what I should have filed, I was like, uh-oh. But I still felt pretty confident because I had relied on the Secretary of State's hotline as well as affirmation from my local clerk that I had filed properly.
Well, Representative, let's get to the gist of the complaint, which is that screenshots of the nominating petitions you filed didn't show the addresses of the voters who signed those nominating petitions. So help us understand what happened, what went wrong.
Well, first of all, I did not file screenshots. I understand that's what the Democrat Party of New Mexico, Tara Jaramillo and Damon Eli said, but I certainly did not take pictures and file any screenshots. What happened was the day of filing, for several months, there have been problems with the Secretary of State's nominating petition online platform. And many of the members of my caucus, I am the caucus chair, so they call and reach out to me for help. It's ironic, I assisted other people in filing properly. But it would say in November you had 20 nominating petitions. The next month they'd say you have 0. And then the next month they would say you had 40. And the next month they'd say you have 0. So we have, there's been problems with the interface of what the Secretary of State is verifying behind scenes and what we see as the candidates carefully counting our nominating petitions. On the day of the filing, the internet was down at my house. I live below Elephant Butte Dam and we have spotty service. So I think we have a museum guest coming in. So that's pretty cool and authentic. Hi there. Oh, hi there. So the day of the filing, the internet was down at my house. So I called the Secretary of State's hotline and I said, hey, I do not have internet at my house. Should I take my laptop somewhere where there is internet to print, or I do have Wi-Fi on my mobile app? So they said, you can use your mobile app. So the Secretary of State's office walked me through. Thank goodness I have screenshots and I had saved my emails when they reset my password. I didn't even know my password because I'd only used my laptop. They reset it remotely, helped me download, and stayed on the phone with me until the papers were coming out of my printer. And that's when I hung up. The papers that printed is what I filed. Now, they were photocopied, edges were cut off from what was submitted and what you see in the brief. But what I saw was a header that said nominating petition. Bottom of the page, nominating petition. 10 signatures per page, or 10 names per page. But instead of a signature, a fake electronic generated signature, it had a voter ID. And so that voter ID, I know that voter ID has all the comprehensive information. And when I got to the clerk's office, I said, hey, jokingly, but not really, can you cross all the T's and dot all the I's? Because if I make a mistake, the Democrat Party of New Mexico will sue me. And so they gave me the rubber stamp, and I walked away at 11:30 with plenty of time to fix any things that would have been insufficient, and got certified from my clerk and certified from the Secretary of State.
What does the Secretary of State's website interface need to be updated to work better with mobile devices?
I mean, that is what our IT expert, who was never allowed to testify at the district court, would have spoken to, the fact that I guess there was a couple of things that contributed to that. I use DuckDuckGo, and that browser certainly did not interface. And so what the Secretary of State's office would say is that, oh, well, it works great with Chrome. But they didn't ask me if I was using Chrome. I could have. And so, yes, so the process of taking the 122 valid nominating petitions that one person signed, one petition at a time, and converting it into an image that mirrors the antiquated paper application did not work. And so what I printed didn't convert correctly.
Uh, Representative, all five Supreme Court justices are Democrats. Was the political composition of the state's high court a concern for you when you decided to appeal the district court ruling?
When I saw my lawyers, and also, my clerk, who also said, look, I certified her. The election rule. I am in charge of this election certification, and I certified her. When I read her brief from her lawyer on her motion to dismiss, and I read the brief from the Republican Party of New Mexico, provided a lawyer for me at no cost to me. And when I read the brief, I felt confident that if the Supreme Court followed their own precedent, the cases that were referenced were cases that this Supreme Court had overturned district cases. And so I was more concerned about the fact that ballots had already been printed, and the overseas and military ballots had already been sent out, and that the Secretary of State had just proceeded without my name. We had asked for a stay, that my name would stay on the ballot until the appeal was heard. That was not, there was no response to that. And so it was the time that was concerning me, even though precedent would have been, there would have been no district court hearing, because there's an expediency issue here, and there's rules that say shall not be heard after 10 days. My case was not heard in district court till 18 days after this deadline. I mean, it's far after the deadline. So time was not on my side, for sure.
And as you indicated, you sought assistance from both the Sierra County clerk and the Secretary of State's office. So it must have come as a surprise that the complaint was filed?
It's not a surprise that the complaint was filed, because they've done that in my case. This is not my first time being in court. And this is an extremely competitive seat. It's a seat that was redistricted by design for Tara Jaramillo to win. And so I know that there's always been this, idea that this seat should be a D category, and I am elected by Democrats. So I'm prepared. I'm always prepared for whatever gets thrown at me to kind of put a kink in the election. I would say fair and open election process. So I don't know if that's the right way to say it. I always have an October surprise. I don't know. I fully expect to open my mailbox and have a new ethics complaint. I just do. So I'm kind of used to it, but doesn't make it fun.
And Representative, as you noted, Tara Jaramillo was the person that used to that was elected to House District 38 seat when you relinquished it to run for governor. And the complaint was filed by Damon Eli, an attorney who is also a Democrat and a former member of the House. The House Democratic Campaign Committee picked up the legal fees associated with the complaint. And I guess what I want to ask you is, why do Democrats have it out for you?
I don't know that they have it out for me. I think that they radically gerrymandered the House districts. And even though, I was a co-sponsor of fair redistricting, we spent $1 million as a legislative body developing 3 fair maps that would not take in incumbency information, that would not consider a partisan data, and that would not divide communities of interest. And yet, in fairness and open and transparency, we said the community should be able to comment on these maps. And instead, the Democrats chose to backhanded, pay. It's been proven. They bust people people and paid people to go and give comments and whole, what do you know? The maps that the citizens recommended were the Democratic maps that compacted me with Leader Armstrong and removed my precinct from District 38, and designed the district for Terra Jaramillo. 46% of the vote comes from Socorro County. So I don't think they expected me to move from the west side of the business loop to the east side of the business loop to retake my seat, but it felt urgent. Our state is, because of gerrymandering, pivoting much to the left. And, it started with taking out moderate Democrats, and I choose to be vocal. And I think that's part of it as well.
As you noted, you've been the target of an ethics complaint. You moved a couple miles from your home to run for the seat again, and now this latest complaint. Why do you do it? Why do you pursue? Why do you continue to pursue elected office?
In the time that I knew the redistricting map that was coming and that I would be compacted with Representative Armstrong, Brian Egoff laughed about it when he told me I wouldn't be there and I couldn't have the committees that my leader at the time wanted to appoint me to. So I knew it was coming, and running for statewide office, I went to all 33 counties. And, I had heard that there were pockets of conservative values in the state, but regardless of people's party affiliation, I share the values with the everyday New Mexican. You and I have talked about, like, the work that I do with conservation districts, and you're from northern New Mexico, I'm from southern New Mexico. Our values are the same. I see New Mexicans working hard. We're taxing them when they earn, we're taxing them when they buy, we're taxing them when they own, we're taxing them when they die. They're working hard and they're not getting ahead, and yet we should be the wealthiest state in the nation. Well, we are. We're the second wealthiest state in the nation with the poorest people in the nation.
Yeah.
And I'm always for the underdog, and the everyday citizen is who's losing out when this partisan politics becomes about political agendas instead of the everyday New Mexican. We should not have poverty in our state. And so being in a county that is sitting on gold mines, sitting on silver mines, but watching none of this permitting happen, watching people live in poverty. 44,000 is the average household income in my county. I cannot walk away. I've just dedicated my life to trying to lift up vulnerable families, and that comes with economic opportunity and hope. And there's just absolutely no reason New Mexico shouldn't have those opportunities. It's just, I can't, it's hard to walk away when the opportunity is there and the potential is there, and policies are what are preventing us from getting there.
Representative, we can go back just a little bit to the nominating petitions and something that you mentioned earlier, and that is that other lawmakers expressed difficulty in filing their nominating petitions. I mean, we heard their personal stories. What, if anything, needs to change, either at the Secretary of
Oh,
State
yeah.
level or I
Yeah,
don't know
let's
where
be
else?
clear. I'm not the only one who had problems. And I bet if all the city, county, different folks that are on the ballot, people were calling me from all over the state saying, I didn't write Commission District 3. I didn't write, City Council 2. People were calling me saying, I didn't do this. Or I wasn't even allowed to register because when I went in, the motor vehicle division had changed me from a Republican to a Democrat, and I wasn't allowed to become a Republican candidate, or vice versa. There was one of our own members, Mark Duncan. He runs as P. Mark Duncan. He registered a trailer at Motor Vehicle Division, and his clerk had the courtesy of calling him and saying, hey, you've been getting your nominating petitions under P. Mark Duncan, but you re-registered under Patrick M. Duncan. He goes, no, I didn't. The Motor Vehicle Division did it. So the inconsistencies were clerks being told different ways they can and cannot assist. And the inconsistencies are definitely with the website. And by the way, the district judge quashed our request for the hotline, the calls to the hotlines and what they're in reference to, as well as the work orders that the Secretary of State. I have text messages from Maggie Toulouse Oliver saying that she had work orders in with her third-party vendor because they knew they had problems with the website. So what ultimately, I think, I cannot speak for the justice, but I think that when they put out their ruling, they're going to say, look, the state of New Mexico passed law, and they said they left it to the Secretary of State to promulgate those rules, and she shall promulgate those rules regarding online nominating petitions by 2023, of which she's never done. And so not only is it ambiguous, I think by the end of the hearing, no one knew. The Secretary of State's own lawyers could not tell us which petition is legal. And I think that will have to be done. And I hope that we can do some updates to the process. We'll have to do some revisions to that law, but I mean, I'd be happy to introduce it. Why does, based on your party, you have to get a different amount of signatures? Like, this needs to be simplified. But what I really felt was, I had these moments where I thought about the everyday citizen who just wants to go in and run for school board. And
Mhm.
if someone could get them off that ballot on a gotcha, did we really make our rules so complicated that you need an election lawyer to review your papers before you turn them in? And if that's what they did, it was by design. And I appreciated Justice Thompson saying, is this just a gotcha? And it really was.
And so do we know, I mean, is there an effort afoot to review the process and see what needs to be done to make things a little bit smoother for candidates?
I think there will be, I'm in the minority. So the people in the majority, including Damon Eli and Maggie Toulouse Oliver, helped write this bill. So do I think that the people in power who keep centralizing power and creating these opportunities for gotchas want to clear this up? Maybe they haven't done it organically. They haven't promulgated the rules organically, but maybe the Supreme Court will order them to.
Representative, during a news conference after the Supreme Court hearing, you accused the quote unquote establishment of using what you call the broken system as a weapon against democracy and open elections. Can you elaborate? What did you mean by that?
Well, I think what was interesting was in district court, who was choosing to listen to the hearings? It's the folks that we knew get paid millions of dollars to manage Democratic campaigns for the farthest left. I will say again, starting by disenfranchising the moderate Democrats of the state by spending, in some cases, $2 million on election cycle to remove a moderate Democrat because they only vote with their party 95, 96, 97% of the time. The people who established the laws, the people who did the radical gerrymandering. I noticed that Brian Ingoff was watching the hearings. Natalie Ogin, a well-known far left political consultant, and people who have spent a lot of time accusing me of over 280 infractions that panned out to nothingness. And so those folks who have made those things that appear to be about transparency, a fairness, a balance. Well, yeah, they definitely are using these things, that the laws that they pass, as a weapon against this industry and against people who are not 100% aligned with their agenda, starting with the moderate Democrats. And that's certainly not where the everyday New Mexican is. That is why I think, I don't know if you've looked at this, but now that the Secretary of State is forcing people against their will to register, even with a conscientious objection, even with a religious objection, the Democrats as of March 30th had 11, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 new net voters for the year 2026. Republicans had about 1,800, maybe 1,200 new net voters for the year 2026. The independents, decline estates, and others grew by 18,000. 18,000. So people feel disenfranchised by both major parties, or we are forcing people to vote, to become registered voters. We have no idea how this process works, who the parties are, what their platforms are. And so, we've got a lot of work to do to reach the citizens and to ensure that people know who we are, what we stand for, and to get them to the polls.
Representative, speaking of work to do, you're running unopposed in the primary, but you face the Democratic write-in candidate in November. What's your game plan for the campaign and, more importantly, for the legislative session if Republicans are still in the minority?
Yeah, well, so first of all, he is a write-in through June. If I think he needs to get 52 signatures, and then his name will appear in November. So he will not be a write-in in November. He's a
Thank you.
write-in in the primary. So I will continue to work hard. I fully expect it to be one of the most competitive races. It is a 50-50 seat. So I still have quite the task ahead of me to be the victor in November. And I'll keep doing what I do. Meet with my constituents every day, be engaged in my community, listen, be responsive, provide solid constituent services, and I believe I'll prevail. The state is trending red, definitely trending conservative, regardless of registration. Because even in that independent, declining state and other, 66, it's over 60% are choosing to vote for the conservative ballot. My first year in 16 is when Valencia County went red, and now in the conservative category, you can add Deming, Hidalgo, Socorro, Torrance, Valencia. Guadalupe, Cibola, and some of these counties have been trending 4 and 6 points to the red. So I think that we have a really good chance of picking up some seats. We've been very intentional about recruiting candidates that reflect their district, naturalized citizens that are running in the valley, that grew up on farms and ranches, and and people who are living out the American dream, people who are really reflective of their district, known commodities in their communities that are walkaway Democrats, like Representative Luis Terrazas, like Senator Gabe Ramos. So we've got a good slate of candidates, and they're working really hard. We're always the underdogs because the money goes to the majority. And so, we're usually outspent at least 3-1. Sometimes, one year I was outspent 13-1. So we work harder. So what do we do in the majority? We keep bringing common sense. Let's use CYFD as an example. I have been asking for CYFD to be disconnected from the governor's office for
Mhm.
years. Years since it's one of the first bills I filed. Whether it's an independent review committee with authority, not an ombudsman, because we are now paying almost $200,000 to an independent ombudsman who has no authority. But really making effective reforms at CYFD. I've introduced probably over 60 bills, but many of them are about independent authority, continuity, evidence-based driven models. So I'll introduce those bills, and I don't have to pass a bill for reforms to happen sometimes. It's about just elevating the issue, getting out there, trying to get press releases out, trying to get your story told. And lo and behold, the AG is recommending things that the Republican House caucus has been asking for years. So it's great to see it happen. I don't care who makes it happen. I just want children to stop dying in CYFD offices in state custody. I want the abuse and neglect to be reduced to the minimum. It shouldn't be 20% of our state that are living crisis. We've got to reform CYFD.
I was going to ask you about the state's child welfare system, because I know that that is an issue that is very important to you. And after the AG's office issued this blistering report on CYFD, is the solution here to start from scratch?
It almost is. I have had bills to abolish and restart, but there's also there's things in place. There's a Kevin S. lawsuit. It's got evidence-based interventions that need to be there, but it cannot, this is an agency that's an island unto itself. If there is a complaint, the complaint is settled within CYFD. The general counsel makes a decision, and then it goes to the secretary who makes a decision. And that secretary is appointed by the governor. So I do think it has to be decoupled from a state agency that's appointed and govern and serves at the will of the governor, because no governor, Republican or Democrat, has been able to resolve these issues. Although I will say, under Susana Martinez, there was one death in state custody. One. That happens monthly under this governor. So it's worse than it's ever been. And there is the Substitute Care Advisory Council that's made up of experts. They make recommendations every year, and no one has to listen to them, and no one does. So there's the Substitute Care Advisory Council that could have a bigger role. There's lots of ways it could be done, but probably starting from scratch, using best practices. It's a lot to unravel and to relaunch. Might be the cleanest thing to do.
Representative, if we can go back and to a topic of the November elections, and you alluded to this a bit, and I wanted to ask, what's at stake in November? Is there a chance that Democrats could gain a supermajority in the legislature?
Well, they're not going to gain it from my seat, I'll tell you that. But I mean, I guess it's always a possibility. What is at stake? New Mexicans who are watching this, and I know a lot of the folks in Santa Fe, in the metropolitan areas, have a very different worldview and a different way of life than those of us in Truth or Consequences in my area. I mean, there's 6 people per square mile in my district. Our Western way of life, the agriculture, the oil and gas, the hard work of citizens that get up before the sun comes up and make sure that we have a reliable, affordable energy, the people who put food on our table, we feel very disenfranchised because just the sheer numbers of it. So we talk about this rural and metro divide, but now there's this divide between, like, is the government really supposed to make every single decision for children? What is the role of parents? Where are parental rights? So it's really about balance. My freshman year, we had, I've never been in the majority, but we had a lot more moderate Democrats, and the progressives, the people who watched the hearing and were probably just biting, chomping at the bit for me to remove from the ballot. Those folks first took out the moderate Democrats. And these are people who live in rural New Mexico, many of them Hispanic Catholics, they really believe in local community providing solutions. And I do too. They want to empower their soil and water districts to take care of conservation in their areas. They want their teacher to be talking to them about their child, especially when they're in crisis, most of all when they're in crisis, not the government driving a wedge between them. So it's about balance. When those moderate Democrats went away, there was no room for any sort of, you've seen it, deliberation. I mean, like sometimes we walk in to present a bill, if our bill even gets heard, and the members will literally leave. And then someone makes the motion to move to table. They're just like not taking seriously, right? Or like when Representative Jones and I introduce a bill, we have like 13 hotlines for everything under the sun, except for a mom who wants to choose life. So we asked for $100,000 in the Department of Health's, I don't know, $40 million budget for a hotline for moms who they are pregnant, they want to be pregnant, they are choosing to birth that child, and what are the resources we can provide for them? And the bill comes back, they know who I am, and the bill comes back amended and says, people who can be pregnant, persons who could lactate. And you're like, can you guys, like, there's no room for moderation. There's no room for balance. We are so out of balance in Santa Fe that bad bills pass and someone has to implement them. Someone has to enforce them. And these laws impact our day-to-day lives. And so balance is what's on the line. And this governor, whoever's this governor, will be the governor when we have our next redistricting. And for goodness sakes, I mean, I don't know what more they could do to gerrymander, but I'm sure they'd make my seat harder. I hope I don't have to move to the other side of town again. But I really like my spot on the river.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the governor's race. Do you think that the Republicans have a strong contender?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Are you kidding me? I mean, let's go down. Can anybody suggest that they don't? Okay. We've got Greg Hall. Greg Hall, mayor of Rio Rancho. Talk about the tale of two counties. Look at Rio Rancho and Albuquerque. Look at Sandoval and Bernalillo, tale of two cities. We're talking, the only difference is policy. That's it. Safety. You can go to the park in Sandoval County. You can go to the park in Rio Rancho. You don't have to worry about a drive-by shooting. Literally, losses of life and drive-by shootings. You can look at the number of businesses that are opening and the ribbon cuttings that they're going to, and that the quality of the housing. And I mean, it is crazy to me what governance does. It's proof that policy matters. You move on to Duke Rodriguez. That man has extensive knowledge in healthcare, which is one of the most important things that we've got to fix in our state. And so the direction that we're going is just driving up the cost of care through poor policies, through capitated rates, and all the things that we're doing that are making it so expensive no one could ever afford healthcare without it being subsidized by the federal government and by our state, heavily by our state. And then you talk about universal childcare. The same principles apply to all these entitlement programs. And so you think about someone like Duke Rodriguez, who's a self-made millionaire, first in his family to go to college, understands healthcare. And then Doug Turner, this guy from Bernalillo County, who has when you have someone who has been able to maneuver the local, state, and federal regulatory environment and to become self-made millionaires, that has the understanding he has and partnerships he has with, whether it's UNM, whether it's New Mexico Tech, or his relationships across the United States and around the world, we've got to pivot. What we're doing, we are the second wealthiest state in the union with the poorest people in the nation and most heavily dependent on the federal government. Why? Because of poor policies. I want a businessman. I want someone who's going to take a pivot and take a turn and move New Mexico forward.
Are you backing any particular candidate in the primary or backing all three?
I mean, I'm rooting for all of them. I have made it a practice not to endorse during the primary, but I mean, my gosh, if it is Deb Haaland, which I think it's looking like it's going to be, yeah, let's just, I'd like to see her, I've sat in some of these committees I've had bills before tax and revenue when members of the body say, what is FICA? I mean, you got to govern. You got to govern, and you have to come with ideas and solutions. And it looks to me like she's more of the same, or maybe the people that were watching my district and Supreme Court hearing, they're her handlers behind the scene. But I want someone who signed the front of the check, not the back of the check. I want someone that has had to pull themselves up by their bootstraps and have created something from nothing. And I want people who turn nothing into prosperity, that live out the American dream and want to see that for all citizens. I want the American dream, regardless of your circumstances, that you can become a success if you're willing to work hard enough. And so, one of the major differences between the Republican that are running for governor and Deb Haaland is that Republicans don't believe that you can be a victim and a victor at the same time. Everybody has equal opportunity if you're willing to work hard. And so, we believe that you can overcome your adversity and you can succeed. That requires government to get out of the way. And one, your local community has solutions. They know your community best. Parents have the primary responsibility of caring for their children and should not forfeit it to the government and should not be expected to, whether that's education and healthcare. I mean, these are basic differences. So I'm really excited. And what do we have? A 70-year history of going 8 years Democrat, 8 years Republican. And, people, I don't know where people are getting the idea that we can't have a Republican governor, because that has been the trend for 70 years. And more people are voting Republican and more people are leaving the Democrat Party than ever before.
Representative, as you know, the Republican Party of New Mexico has been dealing with some inner turmoil. How do Republicans field candidates for statewide office and offer voters an actual choice, not just in conservative districts, but everywhere?
Well, the time for vetting candidates has passed. And so where we're at now is uniting around the ones that we have and making sure that, I want to see unity. I don't like the infighting. I think we should be focused on getting out the vote, doing voter registration drives, hosting neighborhood parties, just doing what people can to share our message and what we have to offer the state. A different path. We know that the voters of New Mexico are trending our way. That's why we're seeing a decline in the number of people registered Democrat, and we're seeing an increase in the Republican Party, as well as people going to independent, decline to state and other. And those folks tend to go our way. And I think that this is a great opportunity for us. We have such an opportunity to win in November. I'm looking forward to picking up seats, because why? We believe in local decision-making authority. We believe that parents are in charge of their children and should be allowed to go to a doctor's appointment with their children and not be expected to wait in the hall. We believe in protecting girls' spaces and girls' sports. I mean, we've come too far to go back now. We want to protect girls' spaces and being able to buy a gas oven if you want a gas oven, for goodness sakes. Like, just having a limited amount of government and having balance in our state. I think people are tired of being bullied. Businesses need consistency in their regulatory environment. So I'd say to any of the conservatives, I'm not going to say Republican. If you're a moderate Democrat, if you're a conservative, if you're independent, decline to state and other, and if you're Republican, it's time to unite, to get out and just talk about what the opportunities are when we have limited government and we trust people. With freedom comes responsibility to make the solutions for their local community, get involved at a local level, parent for goodness sake, and don't forfeit your rights to the government, and get engaged. Teachers want to teach. Businesses want to thrive, and that can happen if we at least have balance. No one's suggesting that we're going to take the majority, but for goodness sake, we should have some balance in the state.
Okay. Well, Representative, thank you so much for spending time with us today. Did I miss to ask you anything you wanted to add? I did want to conclude by something that we talked about when I saw you this week, which is the Dow is up.
The Dow is up.
Anything I'm missing to ask you? Anything you want to add, Representative?
No. And, thanks so much for the opportunity. This was not about me. It wasn't about a candidate. It really was about voters. And I'm just so thrilled that the Supreme Court ruled on the side of democracy, and that, the voters will decide in November.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you again. And thank you, as always, to our viewers and listeners for tuning into Around the Roundhouse. Join us every week as we talk to newsmakers in the political realm by subscribing to the podcast through Spotify, Apple, YouTube Music, or obviously wherever you get your podcasts. For the latest developments, including our ongoing election coverage, and trust me, there will be a lot of election coverage between now and November, follow our coverage online at SantaFeNewMexican.com, where you can also subscribe to our political newsletter, The Roundhouse Report. Until next time, I'm Daniel Chacón, and this has been Around the Roundhouse.